That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Now this gentleman now has to see.
That's my check. Yeah, that's my check. What's the shit?
Outside.
He wants to get involved.
And we're going to first, if you could look at your green sheet, this is the group meeting agreements, and I will just go through this. And if there's any speakers that are going to be speaking, the College Samad, where's Cheryl? Cheryl Wagner? Are you, you can sit up here if you like.
Oh, no, I'm
But, okay.
I appreciate it.
So we have the green sheet. This is our group meeting agreements, and we always go through this first because these are important to show respect for one another. We didn't get the microphone yet, so I'm going to speak loudly for the moment. The basic agreements help ensure inclusion and open dialogue, listen like allies, respect the wide diversity of choices and perspectives that we have here in the room today. Even if you disagree, we ask not to judge or invalidate other people's experiences. Number 2, move up, move up. People who are quiet are encouraged to speak. And those who have spoken a couple times, try to encourage those who haven't said anything yet. Because there's a lot going on inside their head, as you know. We use owl vision. It's the ability to listen closely to the speaker. And I know I need work on that myself. We have to become good listeners. Number 4, recognize the overcoming oppression that overcoming oppression helps all of our liberation. It's our responsibility to challenge racism, sexism, homophobia, ageism, and other forms of prejudice. And number 5, respect spiritual beliefs, altered states of consciousness, definitions of reality that fall outside the mainstream material view. And number 6, in order to be as clear as possible, try to use I statements when speaking to the group. I feel this way, as for example, or I think. Thank you. This helps us avoid misunderstandings. And lastly, to create, two more. Pay attention to repeating patterns in each other's lives in order to identify the root causes of oppression. Notice common themes and roles that that play out together as a group. And lastly, to create trust, and we respect confidentiality. The group can decide on what level of disclosure and openness is acceptable outside the group. We are on video for the first hour, so if anyone doesn't want to be videoed, please step aside for the first hour, maybe let us know. And it's a work in progress. This is about our 6th meeting in 2 years. We meet every 3 months, or sometimes 6 months. We had a little lag at one point. And we will meet again about the time of April. And let me welcome you all. We have a lot going on in the city, as you know, with the Department of Justice report and the recent killings of Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, and many injustices that we've seen at the hands of the police. Of course, we're concerned about crime in the city as well. So we need to have a good police force and adequate reforms so that crime will be taken care of in our city and we can all be more secure. I want to introduce today, by the way, the washrooms are over here, and leave the door open as you exit because it locks when you're done. So leave that door ajar as you exit the washroom. And today I'd like to introduce William Clarence Marshall as our Master of Ceremonies facilitator for this meeting. William I know from the Carl Stokes Brigade Coalition and actually quite a few other things that he's attended. We had a fundraiser at my house a few years back, and he surprised me with his booming musical voice. He's actually an opera singer at the same time, so he's a hands-on guy for coalition work and an artist at that as well. Thank you so much. Here's William.
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, I can be heard. Wonderful. My name is William Clarence Marshall, and I will serve as moderator / taskmaster for today's event. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for all coming to today's gathering. It's very important in light of recent affairs happening here in Cleveland and throughout the nation. If you've not had the opportunity to register, please do so at this time. Leave complete information so that you can be contacted for following events. Before we continue, a few housekeeping rules. As MLK has an upper berth, which we are in right now, we ask that you be mindful of that. There are patrons downstairs who are reading and studying. We also thank the staff and management of the Cleveland Public Library for the use of this facility. There is a limited amount of parking, free parking in the rear of this building. Restrooms are upstairs and down. You have 30 minutes. Ernie Harris from Black on Black Crime will speak upon that. Organizing and collaborating is 10 minutes. Amir El-Haj Khalid Samad from Peace in the Hood, Coalition for a Better Life, Task Force for Community Mobilization will speak on that. And with that, I invite Cheryl Wagner to the microphone. Be mindful that you have about 5 minutes.
Good morning. Good morning. I just want to take a moment of silence because I did lose a grandchild also to the street. Just take a moment of silence. Let the birds be light. Amen. Wow, I'm here to talk about the red light camera. Hallelujah. It was an honor to even be involved in the red light cameras, you know. I have got so many tickets over the years just from doing 27 in a 25-mile zone. 27, maybe 26, but I still got a ticket. You know what I'm saying? I done got so many tickets over the years. I took them and put them in my prayer urn and I just tear them up now because I'm not going to pray. But I'm so glad I was a part of the red light camera. When they asked me, and I got a ministry, the Sisters and Sisters ministry, we took all the posters and we went all over the city of Cleveland. I had my grandkids working with me, stapled them up on poles. We went from area to area. We was all on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? I'm in the Rooms to Alcohol's Anonymous, so I know a million people. I had them sign the petition. You know, I got over quite a few signatures myself. You know, and when they asked me to get involved in it, I did. I don't really care for, you know, the speed light thing. You know, most of the states don't have it. I think almost Ohio or Cleveland is about the only one that has that. So I don't think it's fair anyway. But I'm glad that we was able to get that fixed. We was looking at what we was looking at. Just 50% of the votes, and we got well over 50%. You know what I'm saying? So I thought that was just a good thing to be involved in the red light camera. I wish I could help the other cities, and the other cities get involved and do the same thing. Start a petition. You know what I'm saying? Start a petition wherever you at, because a petition does work if we get involved as a whole. But we got to come together as a whole. We can't do this thing by ourselves. You know. So with Black on Black Crime and Black Men's Army and the Hip Hop Workshop, we came together and we made that happen. And I ain't got too much to say. I'm just glad I was involved in it and we did what we needed to do. And I'm thankful. Now, sometimes they're still flashing. So if you still see it flashing, you still might get a ticket. Don't say, people say, well, don't pay no attention. Please pay some attention. Because they're still trying to get some money that they're not going to get. You know what I'm saying? So be mindful of that when you go past and see it flashing. If you get a ticket, please take it downtown. Don't just hold on to it. Please take it down there and get it fixed. That's what I want to say, get it fixed. I really don't have too much else to say. I just want to represent the Black on Black Crime Sisters Ministry. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I thank the Creator of the universe
Oh, yeah.
for blessing me with the spiritual, mental, and physical wherewithal to be here with you today. As a member of the Committee for Social Justice, I'm emphasizing to you that as a young organization, our initial focus, but not our only priority, is the so-called criminal justice system, which, as recent events have indicated, has been and still is no justice for African Americans, especially African American males as young as 12 years old. Why? Since our enslavement as people of African descent in the United States of America, and continuing, especially after the failure of Reconstruction on. Police in any form relative to African Americans, especially as African Americans migrated to the north during the First World War on. Police departments have been paramilitary armies of occupation in our hoods. And the system, the capitalist system in the United States of America, in terms of its so-called criminal justice system, has allowed and continues to allow, and as recent events have indicated, continues to allow policemen, especially European American policemen, to kill African Americans, especially African American males, both boys and men, to kill African American males with impunity. That means without punishment. And that is based upon them, the police, knowing that if and when they kill African Americans, especially African American boys and men, they will not be punished. Now, in terms of the so-called criminal justice system, this is ultra-institutionalized in the local, state, and national courts, which means that in terms of so-called grand juries, unless the prosecutor, and there are very few of them, have a commitment to assertively or aggressively implement their responsibilities as county prosecutors in terms of how they should interact with grand juries. Unless they have the commitment to do that, then there is no justice forthcoming from grand juries, which is why very few grand juries indict police in terms of their having killed African Americans. Now, of course, we have ultra evidence of that recently, both in terms of the grand jury relative to Michael Brown and the grand jury relative to Eric Garner. So therefore, in terms of no justice, there is no justice for African Americans in the American judicial system relative to criminal cases. Now, it's essential to realize, given this stacked deck, given this Goliath, that it requires protracted struggle and a prolonged commitment to finally address this system of injustice now. And I mean now, because it is been perpetuated too long. And we, as the as the Committee for Social Justice, have focused on the Cleveland atrocity, the 136 gunshots, as our focus in terms of finally engendering justice, which causes me to make a comment before I further make comments on the Cleveland atrocity, and that is that I do not perceive that justice is forthcoming for Tamir Rice in terms of the outcome of the current investigation, which will be presented to the county prosecutor, which evidently in turn will be presented to a county grand jury here in Cleveland. I do not perceive that the outcome, given that process, will be justice for Tamir Rice. What I perceive is probably occurring is, given that you had at least 2 members of city council, Zach Reed and I'm told Jeff Johnson, but especially Zach Reed, mentioning that Tim, hold on a minute, whatever his name is, that shot Tim Holman, whoever it is that shot Tamir Russell, that he should resign. I think that's probably what made itself from the Tamir Rice case, is that the policeman who shot him, Tim Holman, should resign. I think that's what I have. That's the most that I have. Now, going to the Cleveland atrocity. The Cleveland atrocity at this juncture involves some complications that will make it more difficult to engender justice. First of all, in terms of Michael Grillo, who fired 49 shots, 15 of them on top of the hood, after the other scoundrels had stopped firing. In terms of the date of his trial for 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter has been delayed twice. And still, they have not come up with a date for the trial. And at this point, the attorney for Michael Grillo, Angelo, his last name is Angelo, has pressed charges against the county prosecutor, saying that the county prosecutor, in his grand jury deliberations, or deliberations with the grand jury, used as evidence information that Grillo was required to give to the internal police investigation after the Cleveland atrocity occurred. Now, evidently, legally, it is not proper for a county prosecutor to use information given to the internal police investigation in his proceedings to bring about the indictment of Michael Briller. So if the judge O'Donnell agrees with Angelo, then that adversely affects a trial for Michael Briller in terms of his having, obviously, murdered Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams. So it's important to watch what happens to what is now occurring in Judge O'Donnell's, let's say Judge O'Donnell's court relative to the attempt of Michael Briller's attorney to dismiss the case against Michael Briller. It's in the realm of possibility that could happen. And that is extremely important because the conviction of Michael Briller is very important relative to facilitating what we in the Committee for Social Justice are emphasizing, that is that all 13 of the scoundrels that perpetrated the 137 gunshots should be fired. So that would make it difficult, more difficult to fire them if Briller is not convicted. Now, I'm running over time and therefore I have to close, but I have to emphasize this, that we also have a complication relative to our commitment to fire all 13 of the scoundrels, and that is that 9 of the 12 who are essentially still getting paid but can't patrol on the street, the 9 of those 12 have filed a suit saying that they have been excessively punished for not being able to be on the street so they can get overtime. Now, I'll just have to say the magnitude of what they committed in terms of atrocity causes their suit that they filed is to be absurd. So that if that suit is allowed to get support, then it's going to be extremely difficult to fire those other 12 who are obviously still getting paid for doing nothing. So in closing, I stress that this is a long, prolonged, protracted struggle that is obviously going to go into 2015, and depending on what ensues, may go into 2016. And there's some things that we can do if it goes that long, especially with the city, let's say, elite that controls the city being concerned about what happens as far as the GOP convention here in 2016. So on that note, I'll have to just say, let's keep the faith and continue the struggle.
Brigade, discussing the Department of Justice finding against Cleveland Division Police. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
I was part of a group 2 years ago that was convened by Gerald Carver Henley and Donnie Castard, Ada Averhart, and several others who were deeply concerned about the tragic deaths of Timothy Ray Russell and Melissa Williams. There's Gerald walking in right now. And so in the process of that meeting, we got together on a regular basis for several weeks, and we discussed the events that had taken place, and we were just appalled. As a result of that, a document came out. Our group, called the Coalition for Community Justice, sent a missive to Eric Holder, United States Attorney General, Tom Perez, who was then the Assistant United States Attorney General, with several others, the Black Caucus Foundation. We have a page, 3 pages long, all major universities and newspapers. And nothing was said about the 137, really. I mean, there wasn't a big outlay of concern on the media as there has been with Michael Brown and young Tamil and what have you. So, but this document was an outgrowth. Now, I was going to discuss it, but when I found out that there was a 10-minute segue, I really don't think that that is an appropriate amount of time to really give a thorough swath of what was entailed in the document that we sent to Eric Holder. We did discuss in it things like racial profiling, stop, search, and frisk. I will share with you, for instance, the first page. The horrific event on the evening of November 29th, 2012, resulting in the deaths of 2 unarmed suspect citizens is totally unacceptable. Some have publicly characterized the Cleveland Police Department as being out of control, with others characterizing this as an Emmett Till Klan-style lynching. This further cements the perception that with some members of the public. There's a public perception that law enforcement be held to the highest standard of integrity, professionalism, and use of judgment in the execution of the duties with which they are vested and which publicly financed. Those expectations have now been called into question. Therefore, at that time, we called for a 2-day United States Senate Judiciary Subcommittee field hearing, which was never held. No one even broached further discussion on that. We wanted it held in Cleveland, Ohio, with national simulcast to the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee chambers in Washington, D.C., simulcast to all national media outlets, print, cable, radio broadcast, along with all university law schools on the circumstances surrounding the deaths of Timothy Ray Russell and Melissa Williams, with the public being able to come forth and present testimony. We also wanted to hear from State Senator Sherrod Brown, United States Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine, who did his own investigation, along with James Hardiman, ACLU Director Christine Link, and others. And some of the things that we included in that document are based upon the meetings that we attended all over town at the time of the shooting. We became acutely aware that people are afraid of being stopped by the police at night. People are afraid of being stopped by the police in the daytime. People, especially in Cleveland and surrounding areas, are generally afraid of the police's unbridled authority to beat and kill citizens. We asked in that document for a return to active duty and the ultimate firing of all 13 Cleveland police officers who have now filed a federal lawsuit sort of to counter the angst that the public has put forth as a result of the shooting of Tim and Melissa. All 13 of them involved in these 65 cars citywide, 137 bullet chase. The shooting deaths of unarmed suspect victims Russell and Williams on the evening of November 29th in East Cleveland at the Heritage Middle School followed full internal investigation. We wanted them to conduct a full internal investigation and proper due process proceedings. We also wanted to know if black officers were actually asked to stand down and do not enter the pursuit, as allegedly no black police officers were present at the time of the shooting, even though municipal jurisdiction was predominantly a predominantly black force in East Cleveland. So this is a lengthy document. There are a host of issues that we remanded over to the Department of Justice at that time. As I stated, I really don't think that this 10-minute schmeal is the proper form for that. So now I'm all turned around here. Okay, so I did another statement that I'd like to share with you. We are confused about what to do when we see downtown Ferguson decorated and lit up for Christmas with season's greeting signs strewn across the light post amidst the backdrop of 2,500 uniformed police and National Guard armed with tanks, rifles, mace, smoke bombs, and bullets locked and loaded to kill civilians protesting police brutality. Merry Christmas. We are angry because the purveyors of institutionalized racism advance the notion that black life has no value as black men, women, and children, and now others by extension, are killed with political impunity. We are frustrated with a system that we recognize has failed us. The civil unrest in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and throughout the nation is the direct result of state-sanctioned abuse of police power and authority. It is a political problem that requires a political solution. The tragic deaths of Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Tim and Melissa, and thousands of others has an historic premise. Long before 9/11 and ISIL ever existed, blacks, minorities, and the poor have seen the patty rollers, posses, gulags, and the Klan. Our mothers and fathers have seen a few things. They've seen lynchings and bombings. They've seen their country churches and homes burned to the ground. They've seen Emmett Tills, plural, and Medgar Evers, Fannie Lou Hamers, and Carolina Skeletons. Black men in military uniform with a rope around their neck, swinging from a tree. Mama done seen a few things. They had to sit in the back of the bus and be denied the right to read and be educated. They've been remanded to the nation's jails and prisons for vagrancy and peonage, with life sentences sometimes. They've seen no nigger signs on stores and restaurants and hotels and been denied housing or had to pay more for less. Mama done seen a few things. They sharecropped, and no matter how hard they worked, it was never enough to do more than break even or still owe the plantation boss. Could never get free. They've seen the aftermath of what happened to 3 civil rights workers diligently trying to register blacks in the Mississippi Delta to vote. Mama done seen a few things. Terrorism to black people is a relative term. We recognize it when we see it. We recognize it when someone ain't treating somebody right. We recognize it when we don't get treated right. It is all part of a much larger narrative on slavery, race, racism, class, privilege, and the residual effect of state-sanctioned violence, social control, and power over those deemed expendable. Mama Norma, it is a sad day in this country, but I'm hopeful. I am hopeful because I saw young folk, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, marching in the streets for justice and social change, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. It's a place to start, but the real work has yet to be done. The real internal work is to perform an exorcism on the American psyche, to excise the racism and hatred that creates the rules that allow a grown black man to be murdered on international television with no one called to account. That's right. The real work is to change the modus operandi of the institutions that defund black studies departments and won't allow black institutions to exist and thrive with the same propensity of other institutions. We need a heater, y'all, at the Black History Museum. We need lights at the Black History Museum. We need windows at the Black History Museum. We need a roof on the Black History Museum. We need funding for the Black History Museum so black people in this city have a place to go and represent. We need to change the core of police departments. We want to tell Attorney General Holder that yesterday was a start. It's a start. And that's all it is. There's work to be done. We need to change the core of our courts. We need just judicial reform. We need to change the core of our government. We need reform in our government. We need reform in our academic and cultural institutions while our young black men and women, and our young Hispanic men and women, and our young poor white men and women are standing on corners and disenfranchised and locked out from participation, economic, substantive participation in the American economy.
That's right.
We need to work for changes in sentencing and shut down the nation's privatized prison system.
Yes,
We need campaign funding reform, as Greg Coleridge is constantly talking about, God bless you, Greg, that allows political incumbents beholden to private interest with ulterior motives and not public interest to exist and proliferate, and it needs to stop. We need to work humanely to protect and value the lives of all of us in a way that is growth-oriented and sustainable, that is substantive and not superficial. America has issued, as Dr. King said, a blank check from America's moral bank to the repository for the nation's poor, the commiserated black, brown, and poor white folk who struggle each day to put food on their tables, a roof over their heads, to keep the utilities on. That check, Dr. King said, was returned marked insufficient funds. So then it is up to each and every one of us, Brother Don, to ensure that the real work to change the internal mechanisms in America that allow black and poor life to be destroyed by state power without reprisal happens and comes to an end. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Hotep, Abari Ghani, free the land, reparations yesterday. I'm sure everybody in here is ready for revolution. I want to first and foremost seek Almighty God's protection from misleading or being misled into ignorance by anything seen or unseen, spiritual or human or otherwise. And I also want to say that I always speak in the name of the Creator, who we know by many names. I just call God Allah. So whatever name you call your higher power, more power to you. My power is to those that I believe are in this struggle, and I ask Almighty God to give you strength, to give you energy, to give you protection, to give you guidance, and to give you victory. And I also would be remiss if I didn't recognize the fact that God didn't leave us here alone. And all the inspiration, all the writings, may it be in whatever language, I thank the Creator for that. And then lastly, I thank Almighty God for those whose shoulders that we stand on. Because all of us know we're not here by ourselves and of ourselves. And many of us know that we stand on the shoulders of heroes and sheroes who have died not too far from the place that we stand and sit here today. And part of that history is that, you know, right over there, across the street, Elder Don, who I need to seek permission before I even go any further. Do I have permission to speak?
You got it, brother.
That's what we're talking about, being in order. And I know I'm in order when I ask him because I know the history. I know his individual history. I know his history with his soulmate and his queen. I know his history with his family. And I know the blood that's been sacrificed, that people that were part of the history that's connected to him. People who actually died, who actually was involved with gunplay. In 1968, July 23rd, 16 and 17-year-old young men, many of them who died that day. Some who went to prison for 20 and 25 years, we're connected to them by the hip. Not only in this life, but also in the next. So I think that that's a qualifier in many ways, especially when we talk about the city of Cleveland, because Cleveland has a deep history of struggle. And that struggle was not just always philosophical or theoretical or conceptual, it was physical, it was paramilitaristic. And many of us died, and many people went to prison. We just buried 2 in the last 90 days. Many of you probably never heard of the word, and I say Asu Bey. How many people here have even heard that name? There's a few, and that's good. But Asu Bey was 16 years old when he carried an M1, not too far from here, in a valiant struggle against oppression and injustice, not in the face of Jim Crow, but in the face of a militaristic attack on young black men. That wasn't just literal, if you know what I'm talking about. How many people are familiar with a brother by the name of Nandu? Nandu, another one, a sacrifice, didn't die, but spent over 25 years in prison. He wasn't just a street thug who, just emerged and got involved with the movement and decided to listen to the poetry and listen to H. Rap Brown and listen to Stokely Michael and listen to all of those leaders and heroes and sheroes. He went beyond the listening into action. But he also was married to a sister that got a PhD and is currently teaching at a university right now. So we need to understand that those soldiers, as we stand and sit here today, these were not just soldiers that put on fatigues and threw on some red, black, and green and got out there and got busy because they didn't have nothing better to do, or maybe somebody thought that they wasn't qualified enough because they hadn't got educated enough and enough, MAs or PhDs or DDs or whatever after their name. They did what they did because that's what the nature of the struggle demanded at that time. So I want us to always understand and keep in mind when we say we stand on the shoulders, we stand on some broad shoulders.
That's right.
And having said that, I just want to say that that's why I think it's important that the few minutes that I have is to talk about the importance of authentic collaboration and coalition amongst ourselves. But no doubt about it, that everybody that comes to meetings like this is not our friend. Like what did El Hajj Malik just say? Brothers and sisters, friends and enemies. That's why he always started that way, because he always understood that there were enemies, some of them conscious enemies, some of them unconscious enemies, because of the internalization of pathology in their own minds, that they just thought that anybody that stood at a podium was just up here trying to have fun, or a platform or whatever. And so it was something within them that just made them have to be involved in a challenging personality trait or disorder. But then you also had real live enemies, people who had been caught by the FBI doing something or whatever, and was told because of what they caught doing that they had to cut a deal with them and come to a meeting like this, because if they don't come to a meeting like this and then report back to the FBI, who already got the room bugged in the first place, so all they were trying to see is how loyal they were to the feds, because the room is already bugged. What we're doing right now is already being live streamed right down there on St. Clair or Lakeside, wherever that office. I know you know that. But at the same time, which makes this funny, it was always like, with these handlers, right? They say, well, man, did you go to the meeting? And what did you hear? Did you tape anything? And what was going on? Already knowing that they already had the whole thing on tape. That's the reality of what we're coming out of. So that's why I say that, collaboration, authentic collaboration, and collaboration so important. I'll just say this, and then I'll open it up for a few questions, because we got several meetings going on. I see a lot of sharp, strong people here. Just if I could, and if this makes sense, arrest me if I'm wrong or not. Many of us know that a lot of the energy just came about as a result of some things that came about when Tim and Melissa were brutally martyred, all right, in East Cleveland. Well, many of us know that, right? And young people, I know you are aware of that case and what happened. One of the things that case did do was it began to spark a lot of energy amongst organizations that are here today. And the organizations that are here today that are headed up by people who have spokespersons for those organizations that have been given the permission or have been given the directives, or there's a consensus that they represent what we call, a constituency. And so many of those organizations that are here today were with us right after that tragic situation with Tim and Melissa. And one of the things that we had a consensus on was that we had to name that incident or that tragedy or that martyrdom that took place. And because of that, you know, consensus process coming together, one of the suggestions was by our elder Don Freeman, and we were kind of struggling about, you know, what actually took place and what do we call and this and that. And our elder said, you know, it was an atrocity. And we kicked it around. I knew Gerald Henley was there, and many of you that are here today, I see a lot of organizations that people talked about it, and we kicked it around for a few days, and there was a consensus. It wasn't like, you know, everybody raised their hand and voted like that, but it was consensus that that name and that brand that was put on that tragedy, that incident, was authentic, and it was accepted as consensus. And so we came up with this name, the Atrocity, Cleveland Atrocity. And then the next thing was that actually, that was after the fact that we decided we need to have a letter that was written to the Justice Department immediately calling for an independent investigation on what took place. And we laid it out. We said, why was it, you know, such a problematic thing that no black officers participated in that shooting? But that ain't just problematic then, it's problematic all the time. Because if you look back and go back 25 or 30 years, and many of you may or may not be able to go back that far, I bet you can't find one instance of an African-American police officer shooting anybody of European-American descent in America in the last 30 years. 30 years. So if you begin to add up the number of African-American and Latino people who've been shot down in Cleveland, in Cincinnati, in Columbus, in Dayton, in Toledo, in Akron, in Lorain, in Chicago, in LA, in New York, in Baltimore, in DC, and you start going down and down, what are the numbers? Why isn't anybody came out and said, look, let's look at the last 30 years, and the FBI ain't gonna do it. They're part of the problem. They're part of the problem. The last 30 years, how many people of color have been killed by white officers in this country? Do your research, students, and then find out how many people of color or European Americans have been killed by black police officers in the last 30 years in this country. And if you find one, you're doing good. That's right. Think about that. That's right. When we talk about humanity and an affirmation of all human beings as lives being sacred, why is it that an African American, who probably should be the first one to be on, you know, I mean, if there really was a, you know, the commission of a crime going down, and a brother had his badge and gun in the commission of a felony and a violent incident, then that black officer just had, because there was no other right, there was nothing he could do but, you know, use deadly force. Don't have no incidents of that. Bank robberies, armored trucks, hostage situations, all kind of things that have been going on in this country in all these cities for the last 30 years, and you can't find one? Come on now. Then that lets you know there's something going on here. But you can go to East Cleveland that has a police force of what, 90%, 80% African American, or 70%? And then you can come back to Cleveland that has a 70, almost 70% people of color, you know, demographics in law enforcement. And then you have all white officers who can find their way from down on 2100 at the homeless shelter all the way to East Cleveland and dump 137 shots on 2 people of color.
61 cars.
61 cars. 100-something officers. In the city of Cleveland, where sure enough shootouts, sure enough rebellions, sure enough like you got yours and I got, that took place here. I mean, that's why the CPPA evolved. The CPPA didn't evolve as a union because they just wanted to unionize. No, they because of July 23rd, 1968. That's why CPPA. And then another organization called Black Shield emerged because the black officers were being told in Cleveland in 1968, you can't give white people traffic tickets. You can't give white people parking tickets. You can't arrest white people. In 1968, with Carl Stokes, the first black mayor of the first black man of a major American city, black officers were being told they can't give white people tickets. It's amazing, isn't it? But let me just say this in closing. I know you're doing your homework. Get your laptops later on, get on your phone, whatever, look it up. If I'm lying, I'm flying. Let me just say this, John. Carl Stokes, after the shootout, he was called by some representatives of people who represent leadership in this city. And there's some other people communicate with him that represent law enforcement. You can believe it if you want to, you ain't got to believe it. But I'm going to tell you one thing. A ceasefire was declared on that day. A truce was declared between the forces of liberation and struggle in this city and those that represented law enforcement. Now, some of y'all don't know that. Carl Stokes did not take it to the grave. His brother and a lot of other people knew it. And as a result of that, Harlell Jones and many of the constituencies that are still alive and around today, unfortunately, Harlell has made the transition to the ancestors. But some of them are alive. I can't talk about all of them because everybody be back down there getting questioned by the new FBI. But let me just say this. Let me just say that. I hope you follow what I'm saying. As a result of that, lives were spared and many lives were protected because there was an agreement. And after that agreement, the brothers pulled back. The law enforcement officers of European American ancestry went right into that building over there, and there's various other police departments of precincts around the city, and athletes from the Cleveland Browns, faith-based leaders from all spectrums, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and what have you, non-traditional faith-based groups that many of us don't ever want to acknowledge, like the Nation of Islam and the 5%ers and, you know, those more signs, you know, everybody like, who that, what that, what kind of religion you practice? You know, I mean, all that Yoruba, you know, all that, you know, as a result of that, hundreds of lives were probably spared on that weekend. I was 16 years old. I ain't imagining what happened because I was right there at that basketball court at Case Western Reserve when we heard the boom, 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 boom. And then tried to get a bus from this side of town to the other side of town in the 48A, you know what I'm talking about over there. They passed us by. So we had to run over here to Adelbert and jump on the bus, and the back window was shot out. Emmanuel Leaks, former NBA, first brother to be drafted in the NBA, black first brother. I know you was around because you was around on the court. We heard the gunshot. We saw 16-year-olds running across the cut with bandoleros and M1. Why am I telling you this? So don't think that we ain't been struggling here in Cleveland. I've been hearing all this stuff about Cleveland, y'all. Man, ain't no city in America like this city. Ain't nobody got down in America like we did. But there's always been groups of African Americans who've gone above and beyond the call of duty and said, well, I wasn't with them people, boss. I wasn't with the Republic of New Living. I wasn't with the Republic of New Africa. I wasn't with the Revolutionary Action Movement. I wasn't with the Nation of Islam. Can I get a job? Can I get a grant? Can you put me on the Community Civilian Review Board? Can I get some money from the round table of the round table of the round table? And boss, I'm gonna make sure they don't never do that again. Just understand, if you're not from here, understand where you at and who represent. And we ain't went nowhere. Some of us are still around. We got some young ones waiting in the wings.
That's right.
But I'm saying this to you to say that we believe in consensus. We believe that our brothers behind the bars and them super maxes in the city and this country and in this state, we get their permission before we move forward. The brothers and the sisters, like our brother Shaheed that just came home after 39 years. 39 years in the bowels of the beast. We seek their consensus. We seek the consensus of our elders who've been there, done that, seen that, done that. We may not disagree on tactical things now, because everybody ain't down all the way, like what it is. But that's no problem. If you believe in nonviolence, direct action, I got your back. I just hope you get mine, you know, we decide that, you know, we might take it a little bit further downstream. And it would still be nonviolent time. I just want y'all to know that I ain't promoting no violence. I'm not here to overthrow the government, and I'm not a promoter of violence. I hope we don't have to go back to that era again of the late 60s. That was another thing right there. And fortunately, all of us who were around at that time are still alive to talk about it. You understand the importance of what it is. So, authentic collaboration. I work with a lot of street organizations, and we have constituencies in that family, and also what we call formations. The Nation of Islam is a formation. If I'm here because of the fact that they empowered me to come here and speak on their behalf, I will let you know. If not, then you'll have a member that will be here to speak on behalf of them. If there's an organization, other organizations that we are part of, that are part of the liberation groups that we talked about earlier, many of us are still a part of that. If we're in a meeting with several organizations other than, along with individuals, because we don't ever want to, we don't want to marginalize or diminish any individuals, because individuals make up the groups. If those groups got together out of that constituency base, like anything else, and say, okay, you the general, now you got our blessing, and your vote will represent the whole. You understand? Or Jim Crow or Jane Crow or anybody else. It was from the west coast of Africa, through the hulls of those ships, the thousands and hundreds of thousands whose faceless and nameless souls and bones still lie in that ocean from the west coast of Africa. And those on the other side that are here, that come from what we call the people of Turtle Island, the native.